Welcome to Writers Blockbusters, the show where we treat the final edit of the movie like the script. I'm one of your hosts, Bob Rose. I'm at Thundergrunt Bob on all the relevant social medias, and right now, Jimmy's going to introduce himself.
I am Jimmy George. I am a screenwriter and script consultant, and my Twitter handle is at JimmyRGeorge.
And now, Jamie.
I'm Jamie Nash. I am the writer of Save the Cat Writes for TV and the Save the Cat Beat Sheet Workbook. And you can find me on Twitter at Jamie_Nash.
All right. And today we're going to talk about Oppenheimer. This is our first 2024 episode. We're coming back with arguably the second biggest movie, second biggest blockbuster of last year. Before we get into our talking points, we're going to go around and just say our personal feelings about the movie. That kind of, not the script stuff, just our personal feelings. Let's start with Duke Nukem himself, Jamie. Jamie's name is Duke Nukem on the Zoom chat thing.
Mm-hmm. So that's my pseudonym.
For everyone that isn't watching this, which is everybody. So Jamie, go ahead.
They never made a Duke Nukem movie, did they?
I think they're still teasing it.
Yeah,
I've met the guy who does the voice. He's a real nice guy.
I remember back in the day, Apogee Software. That was that was the bomb back in the day.
This is your review of Oppenheimer. You'd rather talk about Duke Nukem.
Duke Nukem. So Oppenheimer, I didn't see too many movies in the theater last year. I mean, I saw I don't know, less than 5 maybe. I can't. Wow. I'm sure I could remember them if I dug deep here. And I did do the whole what is it?
Barbenheimer.
Yeah.
Barbenheimer.
I didn't do them on the same day, but it was probably the same week or the same month at least. So close enough. And I really was excited about this movie. I like biopics. A long time ago, so I grew up in the 80s, and nuclear war was heavy on everybody's mind. And that was the fear that we all had, anxiety and stuff like that. When I went to bed at night, there was a lot of existential dread as a child of nuclear annihilation. And when I got a little older, my father was a voracious library guy, and he liked history and stuff. And I remember he got the book Fat Man and Little Boy, and I was interested in it, so I read that book at the time. So I sort of knew a lot of this stuff in this, but kind of had forgotten it. By the way, the Fat Man and Little Boy movie, boring. Not a great movie.
Have you seen it?
It's not good. Like, I could see a lot of people being like, well, I saw Oppenheimer. Maybe I'll go and check that one out. I just remember it being really boring. I should rewatch.
I would hope more people went to Dr. Strangelove instead of that.
It could be.
Yeah.
But I knew, like, the fact that they thought, I mean, my big takeaway from that book was that I used to tell people all the time when this topic came up, did you know that they thought that when they set off that first nuclear bomb, they thought the world might be annihilated? Like, that was my big takeaway from that book. That was the coolest tidbit from that book. But I'd probably been telling people that for years and then going into an explanation of it. So I was kind of interested in the subject matter as something that interested me. And my take on the movie was, it's a really complicated take for me, because I liked the movie in some ways, and inspired me to go watch a documentary on it, like, immediately. It inspired me to start Googling. I still haven't gotten the book that is based off of American Prometheus, but I kind of would like to read that. So it inspired me in a lot of ways. But as we'll get into, I had problems with a lot of them. Not that I was totally bored, because I think that's his use of film and cinematic techniques can turn boring stuff into, like, oh my God, this is exciting. Like, he's got the music going, and he's doing things, and he's mixing up. There's all kinds of cinematic techniques he's using to make things feel like this is exciting. And I think this is a great movie to study for those things, because there's some things that I think in other people's hands would be boring, Fat Man and Little Boy, style. But I never really got bored in the 3 hours. But we'll talk about one part where I'm not sure that I got bored, but I checked out a little bit. So I'm mixed on this movie. I think it even made my top 10 list for movies this year, but that's not saying much, except I probably only saw 15 movies, and this was of the 10,
Why
So,
even make a top 10 if you
yeah,
saw
yeah.
15?
It was like when I was picking,
Jamie's top
Yeah,
15.
You could have just said top 15. It'd be like, this is all that I saw.
it's funny because I get all the screeners, and I went through all the screeners and stuff, and I usually do a thing where I'm kind of like trying to figure out what because I have to vote for the WGA stuff and things. So I'm always kind of trying to figure that out. And when I went to make my list, I had to put this on because it was a movie that stuck with me and inspired me to go research more and taught me stuff. And there's a lot of positives to it. But ultimately, this movie's probably like, if I was giving a kind of reviewer grade, it's probably like a B minus, C plus E kind of thing, as opposed to like an A plus, And there are parts of it that are A plus, but parts of it that just don't work for me that we'll talk about in a little bit.
Cool. Jimmy?
So I'm pretty lukewarm on this movie. Nolan's always hit or miss for me. I agree with like a lot of what Jamie said. Like cinematically, like I can watch it and go, this is like a very well made movie. I can appreciate those things about it. There's definitely some times that are really riveting. And I would argue that those things are also writing. Like if you look, the magical realism is all written on the page exactly how you see it. All the stuff that Oppie is imagining is written exactly how you see it on the page. So it's definitely writing, but there is a point to be made that like the execution of that is really where it shines, not the actual writing itself. Yeah, I just think we're not really going to get into this, but like for me, Nolan is not. I never connect with his relationship stuff. Like even in the movies of his I love, like Memento and Inception. And I think there's an argument to be made that Interstellar does it best when we're talking about like relationship stories. But
Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back was pretty good.
Yeah. Chris,
my favorite one.
Yeah,
that
was
best
his
Chris
best.
Nolan.
That's my favorite.
But I don't know. I just I'm always it always rings false for me when there's a relationship happening, especially between a man and a woman, and I'm always just kind of like emotionally disconnected from it. And I don't know if that's the writing or the direction or what, but this was a case where those parts of the story were important and I didn't connect with them at all. And so so overall I'm pretty lukewarm on this, especially from a writing standpoint. And some of the stuff just didn't connect with me, and we're going to go into why.
Cool. For me, I have, if you listen to our Memento episode, that was one where I think you guys were rather positive and I wasn't negative, I was more like groany. And I think that's my complicated relationship with Christopher Nolan in that I think I like this movie way more than both of you. I think I like Oppenheimer way more than both of you, but also, and this is only because we only would know this, I was the most pushback on doing this movie for this show. Like I didn't want to, like, I'm fine watching the movie. I don't want to put it under a microscope. Like I don't want to analyze Christopher Nolan at all. Like it bores me. Like I don't know why. And I did not want to do this for this show. I think you guys could feel that probably in the chat when we were talking about it. I was like, fine. It was like a real big fine. I didn't want to rewatch it twice. You know what I mean? Like I didn't want to sit through this fucking movie twice for the show and stuff. But I also think I like it more than both of you. I think more highly. I like the stuff that Jamie will talk about that he didn't like. For me, it works. I think the relationship stuff works better for me than it did for you. But oddly enough, I didn't want to do this movie. I don't know. It's like this odd thing in my brain where I'm like, I don't want to do a Nolan movie again. And it's like, it's just like having to watch it and think about it and analyze it. And I don't know. There's something that I find arduous about putting his movies under a microscope. And this is no fucking exception. This is no exception at all to me. I just didn't want to do it. And I don't know what that says about how I feel about it, because I think I like it more. I think most of it works for me. That said, I'm not leaping at it. Like, you know what I mean? I don't know. I have such a weird relationship with Nolan. It's so odd. My favorite thing about Christopher Nolan is we both think that MacGruber is a masterpiece, and that's about it. Which it is, and it's better than anything he's ever made. And I do like Oppenheimer. All right. That's such a weird, I don't know. Next time he does a movie and you guys are like, let's do that, you're still going to get me going, fine.
Well, I just think, I mean, I'm not interrupting. You said your piece, right? Like, yes, I can interject a little.
Go for it. Yeah.
I think there are other movies of his that, from a screenwriting standpoint, you can just hold up and be like, you can learn a lot from what this does well. And in this case, in my opinion, there's a lot of stuff that isn't executed on the page so well, for me.
I think there's lessons to be learned. I want to be clear. I'm not saying that there's not lessons to be learned and it's not going to be a good episode. What I'm saying is I don't want to watch it twice. And I don't really want to talk about it that much. But I think that there is lessons to be learned. It's something about the way Nolan makes his movies that makes me go, yeah, it's fine. Just stay over there. Don't make me think about you too much. I don't know what it is. But there's definitely lessons to be learned, and we have good things to talk about. Sorry if I didn't make that clear.
No,
it's just my own personal groan with Nolan, where I don't feel like reviewing him anymore. I mean, and I'm weird too, because Interstellar is probably my favorite Nolan movie, and that's a lot of people. That's where he lost people. I think he got people back with this one, but a lot of people tell me Interstellar is where they kind of separated from Nolan.
I hear a lot of people love Interstellar, though. That's one where I don't hear a lot of people say they love Tenet. I mean, I'm sure they're out there, and I'm sure there's a few that we could find. But I honestly think Interstellar is a little more split. I know people that that's one of their favorite movies of all time.
That's not for me. I mean, for Nolan, it's maybe my favorite Nolan movie, but it's not of all time at all. But that's my favorite of his.
I like a lot of his movies. I mean, though I got to tell you, my son likes to watch movie clips, and I sit with him, right?
Yeah,
and he for some reason he loves The Dark Knight Rises, like just the clips. So my son has autism, so he picks clips that he likes to watch, and for some reason he's always attached to people singing the national anthem. So there's that beginning of the football scene where singing the national anthem. He also likes Borat singing the national anthem, Leslie Nielsen singing the national anthem, and he anyway, and he likes to say that that's who it is singing the national anthem and stuff. But anyway, he's made me recently watch the fight scene between Batman and Bane at the end, and that is the goofiest fight scene. It's almost like they ran out of money. And if you watch the extras in that fight scene, it is funny as anything, because they're just kind of shaking each other, and they're supposed to be having this big battle.
Yeah,
it is the way that thing is shot. Go watch that fight scene. It is it's kind of funny. I mean, I don't know what's going on with that, but it looks like something I would have directed on a low budget or something.
Right.
It's even shot kind of flat at eye level. It's really a strange fight scene.
You remember the opening fight scene in Begins? It's so close up and so quickly cut. It's almost irresponsible. It's the same problem. It's just not. I don't know.
Yeah, but
I have an outright disdain for his Batman movies, which I've expressed.
I could do a whole podcast on that fight scene. Yeah. I actually really like this. I really like the second Batman movie, and I think it's super complicated. I mean, I can see why some people might not like it for a Batman movie, but it's super complex. But it all lands, and I don't know. I'm very impressed by that movie.
Oh, people love it.
Yeah, I think it's a really. In some ways, it's his quote unquote masterpiece in a weird sort of way, because it really is complex. Yeah, it really is a complex movie.
Even if I don't like it, people love it, and that's his pop masterpiece. Yeah,
and Anyway. So I do
It's
like
no
it.
MacGruber, but what
But
is?
I just want to do a whole podcast on that fight scene.
I'm dead serious.
I know you are. That's why I love it.
I'm not. I want everyone listening to know I am not kidding.
Bob, you should put MacGruber on your list, man. On your top.
I don't know. I don't know.
List we must talk about.
Or Borat. We should do Borat sometime. That'd be weird, right? Because of the real
be a
stuff.
Weird one.
That'd be a super weird one. Anyway, let's not talk about other movies. Let's talk about Oppenheimer. Let's get to the topics. Jamie, who wrote this shit? Your mic is off too.
Yeah, no,
okay.
I had to flip back to hit the mic. So Christopher Nolan wrote the screenplay, and it's funny because in interviews I heard him saying he showed it to Jonathan Nolan or something, who was upstairs, but I guess Jonathan didn't write it. He was just the guy he bounces it off of. So I'm not exactly sure about that, but he got the credit for it. But it's based off of the book I mentioned earlier called American Prometheus. By Kai Bird and Martin Sherwin. Mm-hmm. That's who we got.
Okay.
How much was the box office, Jamie?
Yeah.
It was almost $1 billion in box office.
It didn't hit? I thought it hit $1 billion.
This has worldwide 953 million.
Oh.
So it wasn't
just
the re-release.
Under.
After it wins Best Picture, which I kind of think it's going to. I kind of think
I would put my money on it.
Yeah, I just don't think anything's going to push it out.
Get it, man.
I think it's going to win, and then they can re-release it and get 50 million. The 50 million it needs to be 100.
Well, Jimmy, it's what the Academy likes. I think more than You know what I mean? It's an Academy Awards type movie.
Yeah, it is.
It's not about what we're going to talk about. It's that kind of a movie.
The reason I like it and the reason it is in my top 10 and stuff like that, I want movies like this, and I want them to make movies like this. This isn't some weird out of left field thing. It just feels like a movie they used to make a lot of, you know, and they don't as much anymore. So
it wouldn't even be notable in the 90s for this movie to come out.
No,
it wouldn't.
And I think to a large extent, the box office shows that. I think people went and saw it. They were like, I want to see this. I want to go watch this movie. It's well made. They're putting it on IMAX. Let's go check it out. So that's good. I like that.
No, more of, I think its existence is good.
Yes. Big time.
Big time. Yeah. All right, let's talk about taking big swings with screenplay format. Whose was this?
This was mine, but it's mainly for Jamie.
Okay.
So the
Jimmy versus Jamie.
No, not verse at all.
I know.
This is me bowing to the screenwriting god here. So one of the big things.
This is how I will do it. These tablets.
So as much as we're going to talk about how the story is told on the screen, a lot of what got people excited or maybe angry, a lot of complicated conversations took place from the fact that this script, at least Oppenheimer's portion of it, is written in first person. Right. It's not the first script to ever be written in first person, by the way. It's just so notable that Nolan chose to do it. And so I kind of wanted to just talk about to Jamie how you feel about taking big swings with screenplay format and how that has come into play in your career, and just when you choose to do it and when you don't, and how people in the industry respond to it for you.
Yeah. And just to kind of mention the big swings you're taking about in this script, the big thing he did that people talk about is he used first person at times. So he was writing as Oppenheimer. He was like, I walk into the room.
Right.
Mm-hmm. I turn the buttons. Whatever. I see her in the corner. And the other thing he does, which I've done, is he puts different timelines. One is in italics and one is in standard font. And I've done that too. And I can tell you when I did that in particular. I've seen, by the way, the first person thing. He says, I'm the first person who've done it. I've seen it a few times.
Yep.
And I tell you the scripts I used to see it in was found footage. Some people wrote found footage in that, and it was kind of a clever idea. It was it was kind of the form meets meets the function. I feel it's kind of a gimmick. I don't really have anything. If it works for him and it kind of gets attention, he's not really a guy that needs to do that. I mean, this movie's greenlit based on, it's not because he's using first person. So to me,
he doesn't need to do anything. He's Christopher Nolan.
to me,
right?
in his, yeah, exactly. And because
Yeah.
I even asked that on Twitter just now, because I was curious. I was thinking, Chris Nolan's really a guy that is writing almost on spec. He's doing original stuff, Batman stuff, not counting, but that's kind of what got him, and Prestige. And this was actually based on a book, so maybe what I'm saying is false. But I was like, he doesn't really have this laundry list of Del Toro defunct projects. Like, and the one that they reminded me of was The Aviator, which he had to go away from because Scorsese did his. But that was even before all this. I think he picks his shot, he writes the thing, and generally it gets made. I don't think and even Spielberg, he has a huge laundry list of like projects that never come about. But I don't think Nolan operates that way. So whether he writes first person, whether he decides not to write a script and go straight to the storyboards, I don't think anybody cares. I don't think it matters.
I think Nolan actually has more cachet right now than Spielberg.
I definitely think you're right.
Yeah.
I think you're right.
But have you ever had pushback, Jamie, have you ever had pushback from doing that?
I've never had pushback from doing it. I've never done it quite first person, whatever, but I'll give you some examples of what I have done. So the italics thing, I wrote a TV pilot at one point that had multiple timelines, and I sent it out, and my agent was getting confused at the time, or my rep, I'm not sure, it wasn't my agent, was getting confused to the narrative because I was jumping back and forth, and they were just, and it's because of the nature of the way readers read. They read fast. They're like, blah, 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 and they're not paying attention, and they barely
Without the
know the
visual
characters.
cues, it's harder. You know what I
hard.
mean? Like, yeah.
So I changed it. I did colors or italics or both, or I can't remember, just to kind of help them out, to say, hey, it's switching. Hey, it's switching. I put a note in the beginning, blue is this,
Yeah.
and it worked. It worked fine. So that was in response to a problem. That was in response. That was in response to a problem.
That's a great example.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've done other things. Like there's a trick that whenever I show it to writers, like when they do consulting with me, I'm always like, I hardly ever put a slug line on my first page. And it's kind of like a thing. I think you and I were talking about this.
We were talking about this, Jamie.
And it's because movies don't start with like Oppenheimer. Let's say we start on his face. We don't start on living room. We start on face. And that always bothers me when I'm trying to paint the picture. You know what I mean? And I don't do that throughout the whole script, but at least on the first page, I want to have that control. I want to say, we start on a computer, or we start on an explosion or something. And I don't want to start on a living room. I want to start on something else. Not really a big swing there. I'll give you two other examples. So there was a thing what was the movie that Block that you showed me, Jimmy? What's that movie?
Oh, Brian Duffield. That's why I wanted to bring that one up. Yep.
Right.
No one will save you. The one on Hulu.
Yeah. No One Will Save You did this wild thing where they put like a full page block of it's almost like a word scramble or something.
But they're all internals. If you read them, they are like a person freaking out. Yeah.
I did something very similar to that, but it was kind of like an everything everywhere all at once moment. You know how they're flashing through multiple timelines? And I did a block of text with like all these little sentences just to represent boom, 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 just how fast it was, like how you're going through dozens of things. So I do things like that every now and then, just because how else are you going to represent that?
You're going to convey it. Yeah.
Otherwise it's hard. So I kind of do these little short sentences and they're all around the page, and I might bold some to kind of hit you with it or something. It's very much like what he did when I saw that. So that's one place I've done that. And the other place I've done this recently, I wrote a script, and it was actually a biopic, and I actually used artwork in it a lot, because they were like I had it's hard to describe without giving you the concept, which I won't do, but it's like when I introduced characters, it freeze framed and showed you information about them in this very stylized way. That's the part I won't say. And to write that was kind of crap. So I just made it. I made the art, so to
Yeah.
speak, and I just put it in there. And then once I started to do that, because this was a biopic, there were a bunch of other nostalgic, specific items that instead of writing, I just started to put pictures in all over the place. And this is the only script I really did this for. And I was expecting to get pushback from everybody, right? And every single person I sent to never mentioned it. And if I ever brought it up just out of curiosity, they were like, I was like, should I? It was almost like me kind of revealing my insecurity. I'd be like, should I take those out? They were like, no, they're great. I love those. So everybody,
awesome.
I think it just kind of sometimes if you make the right choices for the right reasons, and this is the key factor, if you make the right choices for the right reasons and you have really good justification, it's the same idea behind mini plot. It's cool. It's fine. Nobody cares. The danger is when you start doing these things willy-nilly or do them too much or just do them for no reason, then they start feeling more like mistakes or they feel like inexperience. So it's a very fine line between somebody feeling like they're some newbie that doesn't know what they're doing and just making a mess of the form, and somebody that's done it so much that they're so bored that they want to start writing I instead of third person, which is I think where Nolan is. I think that's what gets him up in the morning. He's like, oh, I got to do this boring screenplay. Oh, maybe it'll be more fun if I do first person. It'll get me engaged. It'll feel different. It'll feel like a.
I love the
feel like
idea of
art.
him going, I got to do this boring screen.
Yeah. And I get the feeling. So anyway, you just have to be really cautious. And whether that's the old lame trope of you have to know the rules before you break them, it's kind of a little bit like that. You kind of have to know why you're doing it. You have to know what it's doing, and you have to kind of anticipate what the reaction will be from a reader. And if you can tick all those boxes and you put in that thinking, and it's not just being lazy because you don't know the difference between third person and first person and you accidentally did it, then I think it's okay. And that's kind of my take on it.
It's perfect. You said everything I was hoping. You addressed it all. Thanks.
Good job.
That's what I'm here for.
Okay. Did you have anything else on that, Jimmy? Just that?
No, it's
Jamie
just
covered it, right?
we don't get to talk about the written form much, oddly, on a screenwriting podcast because it's so visual and the listeners can't see what we're talking about. But this is a case where
we also do the final edit of the movie, so we're even as a show almost disregarding
the written word for the most part. But but this screenplay is out there if you want to look for it. Yep. Just type in Oppenheimer script
just Google
PDF.
Mm-hmm.
You'll find it, and
same
you can
with
see
the
what
Duffield one.
about.
The Duffield one's out there too.
No one will save you. Yeah, I was gonna list a whole bunch of them, but you just covered it so well. Yeah,
A Quiet Place is another one. They have pictures and stuff, and they're only 60 pages. That's the one I always bring up.
Nightcrawler doesn't have scene headings, so no slug lines in the whole thing.
Coen brothers, I think, have done that a few times too.
Yeah, so they're out there. The experimentation.
Didn't Shane Black puts a lot of like funny notes to the
breaks
audience,
the fourth wall, and that created a style that is now very common. But at the time when he did it, no one was doing it.
His almost became the norm in a weird way.
It did. Like self-aware. I am a screenwriter writing to you right now.
The Looney Tunes showing the artist thing, right?
Walter Hill, if you're listening and you've never read a Walter Hill script, he does action stacking, so it looks like more like a haiku. It's very cool. It's a completely different way to do that. And then James Cameron has mirrored that style in Aliens, and Terminator 2 does a lot of action stacking, Walter Hill style. But there's the point was that this writing in first person is super unconventional, and there were multiple reasons for doing it. And the main reason that he got away with it is Nolan. But I like hearing from Jamie that he hasn't had pushback when he makes unconventional choices. So,
gotcha. Well, that's it's kind of a perfect segue into how the story is told, right? Because I feel like the formatting goes directly into that. When to use a narrative gimmick.
Yes, I put nonlinear storytelling, dual POV framing devices, magical realism. Oh my!
I also think before we get into it, I think this also like kind of is the reason this movie had a lot of controversy, right? Because the POV, the actual like gimmick of the movie is what led a lot of people to be like, well, why aren't they talking about this? Why aren't they showing this?
Yeah,
Right?
exactly.
Like and those are all important discussions.
They are.
But the movie itself is, you know, it's using a narrative gimmick, which
lots
kind of
of
makes
them.
lots of them, which kind of makes some of those things other people were talking about, you couldn't throw them in and feel right.
Right.
You
Yeah.
know what I mean?
Tonally
and everything, it wouldn't work to see, you know, to see like the bombs dropping and stuff like that. Like
Right.
it doesn't make sense in the narrative gimmick. Anyway, I just wanted to get that out.
No, I'm glad you did.
It's an important thing. There's a lot of discussion about the movie, but this is usually the response. The narrative gimmick that the movie's using, just like the book, I believe, is the reason those aren't there. It's not because they're not important.
Right.
Yeah.
That's well said. No, I brought it up because I figured this is kind of something that people are having, you know, either they love this shit or they hate this stuff, right? In response to watching the movie, that's the risk of the gimmick. So I read amateur scripts all day, and I read a lot of scripts that are just like not overflowing with format big swings like we just talked about, but they're overflowing with gimmicks. And most of the time the gimmicks are not working. And there's a lot of reasons why. And generally when Nolan works with gimmicks, they're like his thing, right? Like that's what he's been known for, like a dream within a dream, and you know, a story told backwards, and a story where everything is in reverse, literally. You know, these types of things are his calling card. And so this one, for me, there's one gimmick that doesn't work, and I kind of wanted to go through this litmus test I've talked a few times on the show that I use with my clients. And I think there's one of these for me, I'm saving it to last, where it doesn't pass the test. And I think that we're going to go into why that is emotionally in a little while, but I'll go ahead and go through the I have like a few set of criteria that I feel like a gimmick will work if it does these things. And that, so the first one is it cohesive as being complete, as opposed to being completely unrelated? Are the gimmicks cohesive? I feel like all of them are, right? Like,
yeah,
the magical
I would say
realism,
so.
the even though the non-linear is a little confusing, it's cohesive. It fits the rest of it. Like it doesn't. They work together. You know.
I feel like we're not to go back a few points, but the non-linear storytelling, if there was a tighter visual separation between not the Strauss stuff, but the other two timelines, I feel like that's almost like if it looked different. I don't know. If Nolan added a sepia filter or something over one of them, but I don't.
Oh, so you think the execution of the flash forward in Oppenheimer's perspective is a little confusing between when it jumps back to the past?
Having seen the movie 3 times, that's what I find the most like, oh right, this is then versus now. Like I feel like if it had a visual separation, it would be better for the audience.
Yeah, and I've heard that from other people. I've heard some people that were very confused by that when they first saw it.
Yeah,
wow.
The Strauss stuff being black and white is great because it really puts you in that moment the second it shows up. But I feel like the other two could use a separation.
So maybe it gets an X on the maybe it's a little incohesive then.
A little bit. I'm not saying it's detrimental. I mean, by the third time I watched the movie, I'm fine. I get it. But the first run through, when I saw it in theaters, I was like, wait, what? Because like Cillian Murphy he kind of doesn't look that different.
Right.
And then you start to be like, wait, what is this happening? Okay.
Yeah. The framing device too, it's kind of become the standard for some of these biopics, like Social Network is the one we think of,
Yeah.
when we first come.
Yeah.
There's like an investigation, a criminal trial, or something where people are asking questions like, why did you join the project? And then we flash back to when he joined the project. What was the conversation you had with such and such? Boom, we're there. And then that has a narrative going as well as the actual narrative. So it seems to become almost like the knee-jerk way to do these biopics in some ways. I know I've dabbled with this question of maybe I should Social Network it or something many times when I've done biopics. And I'll also say the surreal storytelling is another thing I see a lot in biopics. I started to see this on The Blacklist. The Blacklist had a lot of these, it was like the Michael Jackson story from the eyes of Bubbles the chimp or something like that. It was an actual script that was on The Blacklist. Or I think Muppet Man, the Jim Henson script that was very popular, had the Muppets talking to him and stuff like that. There were things like that. So that's that kind of surrealism, that magical realism, very common. It's almost like go-to. It's almost like the checkbox. Like if I were to say modern biopic on The Blacklist, it'd be like investigation
Framing
or something
device,
that frames. Check. Magical realism, check. So to me, like I don't even blink at these things because that's just what I've read in The Blacklist or seen movies for years. Yeah, so it's like
can we give people listening just like a simple what is magical realism? I feel like people might
it's basically
want to know
what Jamie described. Something surreal is happening and it's close to real, but it's not actually real. For instance, and it's not actually happening. For instance, Oppenheimer, the Oppenheimer's being interrogated about his relationship with the character. I forget what her name is called. That he was having Florence Pugh's character, and then he imagines her grinding on him while he's naked, talking.
Well, his wife imagines
does.
that.
His wife does. See, that's a little confusing, though. I don't think that in the script it's not his wife is imagining; it's Oppenheimer imagining.
I didn't think that was the chapters, but I didn't read that part of the script.
Yeah, it is in the Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm
okay. That moment's a bit complex. More like I was just saying, like him imagining like people's faces melting off.
That's magical realism.
I was gonna say like
what's interesting about this. This is like very much of the Ari Aster magical realism as opposed to like a show called Jane the Virgin that plays with magical realism all the time in a fun. It's exciting. It's fun. It's tongue in cheek. It's you. A lot of people like associate magical realism with something that's fun and happy, and in this case, the magical realism is all like nightmarish and sad and scary. So it can go both ways. Like a perfect example, though, like what I'm saying, like is it my next litmus test is it consistent? Well, like one of the very first shots is him like imagining like atoms and then like seeing light swirl literally above his bed, like in front of his face. That's magical realism, right? So right from the start, we get it. And like it's happening, and then the movie continues to use it consistently. And then the non-linear is consistent, right from within the first 2 minutes, we get 3 timelines, and that continues on. And then, so like another test are your gimmicks consistent? Like, as opposed to the framing device where we get the first scene of the movie is a framing device, and then the rest of the script, there's no framing device. And all of a sudden, 75 minutes in, you get the second scene in the framing device, and you're like, wait, what? Oh, that's right. There's a framing device. Or you get like magical realism 5 pages in, and there's not a shred of it for the rest of the script. And then on page 90, something huge happens that's magical realism. And you're like, as an audience member or a reader, you're like, wait, I don't understand what's going on. And then you're like, oh, right, this is a magical realism story, So consistency for me is really like one of the keys to making sure a gimmick works. If it's like, coming up at least like every once in a while, at least 10% of the time or 25% of the time, at least like throughout and not just like at the beginning and at the end. You know, I see that a lot. I'll read a script and they do all these fun gimmicks at the beginning of the story, and then there's no shred of a gimmick whatsoever, and then the gimmick shows up in the end. It's like, oh yeah, there's gimmicks in this script. So,
and they're not meant to be funny or something.
they're just
drama.
they just think that's enough and that's going to work, and it doesn't,
okay.
because you haven't experienced anything like that for most of the movie. Whereas this one, it uses all of them consistently, and that's like what you need to make it work. So, the next question I usually have is, and this is the one that I think where it runs into trouble, is, does it emotionally enhance the story as opposed to taking away from the overall experience or adding nothing to it? And here is where I think the framing devices and the nonlinear nature messes with the rhythm of how the story is told in a way that like takes away from it as a whole. Like for me, I emotionally disengage when we start getting into those flash forwards, you know, when we start getting into the interrogation and we start getting into like Robert Downey Jr. Strauss, like sitting in front of the council, all that stuff. All of a sudden I'm taken out of it. And I'm just like, kind of, what is happening and why is this happening and why am I supposed to care? So I wanted to get your take on that. What you guys think?
I mean, I think that's where I differ from both of you. I think I really like the Strauss stuff because to me, it's like it's Amadeus. Strauss is Salieri, and you know Oppenheimer is Amadeus. So like that's how I read the movie, and so it makes it a lot more interesting to me. Like the whole thing kind of. I also like the pettiness of the Strauss storyline because he thinks Oppenheimer insulted him to Albert Einstein. He did all this other crap to try to ruin him. And I enjoy that. That interests me on a character level. So, but that's my response to it. I'm not saying everyone feels like that, you know.
By the way, I know I heard in interviews that Robert Downey Jr. said he didn't know how to play the character, and then Nolan said it's Amadeus, and he said, really? I got it. Yeah, that's what he said.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. He actually said that. He said it's Amadeus,
right.
and then Nolan was like, "Oh, I get it.
Oh shit! All right. Well, I read that one right, I guess. I don't know.
Wait, Jimmy, what was your question though overall here? It went from magical realism to this, and
it was does this? I was getting to the different questions of
right, the framing
whether
and the
a gimmick
magical
works
realism.
or not. And then I said, do the gimmicks emotionally enhance the rest of the story, or do they take away from the overall experience?
I see.
For instance,
I was saying yes.
And I'll give you an example. Like when we did Memento, the reason that the nonlinear nature of that story is so great and why the gimmick is so great is because that is the most emotionally impactful way to tell those events. If you tell them linearly, they're not as interesting. Same goes with Pulp Fiction. Pulp Fiction, when we did that episode, the non-linear nature of it is how you learn the theme and the lesson. And here I feel like the non-linear framing devices don't do anything to help it, and for me, they take away from the overall Oppenheimer experience. That's
I'd rather it be more linear, is what you're
saying. I'm saying those things for me, they make it less emotionally engaging. They muddy it.
The non-linear nature or the actual storyline you'd rather have not
the how it's told.
Okay. I'm just making sure.
Is a detriment for me. Whereas in the past, Nolan's how it's told is why it's so great.
Here's my issue with it, and this might be jumping a little bit further. That's why I wanted to ask you to clarify.
I'm setting you up for that.
I might
it's very nuanced.
I might have to jump a little bit to a later topic. So on one hand, I think the framework works well, and I think this is why it's used so often to gather the parts of a long story, of a story that requires many years. And so, because stories that require many years, sometimes the obstacles and the conflict can get muddled because it's, if you could take 4 years to solve the problem, then it just isn't like as urgent as it might feel.
Right.
And you can bring context to it using a framework like this. Like you can give us the urgency, you can give us the feeling that 4 years, because it's all edited quick and you can jump through time and fill in gaps and do all kinds of stuff. So I think it works great for that. I think it's almost and that's why I think this kind of framework is used so often. It also allows us to maybe if they're, and believe it's weird to say a story about building the nuclear bomb doesn't have tension, to win World War II. But I think part of it is we know what happened. So we know the Germans don't get hit. We know they beat the Germans. So there's some, we have some knowledge of that. So we know it's not as dire as like Indiana Jones finding the lost Ark of the Covenant before the Nazis get it or something like that.
Right.
Because we know that they're going to get beat anyway. So in that regard, there isn't as much conflict as there probably was in real life, or tension as there was, and ticking clock as there was in real life. And they sort of underplay that side of it in the execution of this movie. We never really feel like, oh my God, we got to hurry. We got to do this. Instead, it's like, because the government's always like, we have to compartmentalize, we have to slow down. And he's like, he works around that, but he doesn't like, we have to do this, man, or we're going to die. It's not, it's kind of at their own pace in a weird sort of way, even though I'm sure it wasn't that way in real life. So I think the framework helps with that. So here's the part I have trouble with the framework. I find that, and what I was going to say with the framework, one more thing, is if you can provide tension in the framework, it can kind of trick you to thinking there's tension in the longer linear narrative. It just feels more tense because those things have ramifications in the future, and therefore they all, seeing him talk to his friend and his friend kind of asking, I can tell the Russians for you, suddenly feels like it's very important, but it's really not important for like 20 years or something like that. Like that's when it plays out. So it's interesting how that works. So here's where I have an issue with it. For me, and this is for me, whatever reason, I found the most humanness with Oppenheimer was in the past story. I thought he was interesting. He was kind of like a guy who was throwing his ethics to the past because he was interested in the science, but he had the ethics, and he was in love, and he was cheating, and he was doing all these things. Whereas later, I found the character got colder with age, or something. It was harder to parse with age, and that was probably true to life. That's the other thing I want to give Nolan credit for.
It is.
Yeah.
I mean,
I
that's
want to
really
give
true.
Nolan credit. This movie is very, very historically accurate. They're unlike a lot of biopics where you'd look stuff up and it would be like, oh, that didn't happen, and this did.
Bohemian Rhapsody.
Yeah, this movie fits.
Social Network.
Yeah, Social Network.
Yeah.
Like when I watched the documentary of this movie, it does pretty much track. There are a lot of things, most of it,
awesome.
He's tracking. So, and I think maybe that's why some of the things I don't like about it are there. So later in the film, so after the bomb goes off, and this isn't a criticism just I had, so I don't want to make it like, but honestly, I looked at my watch and I was like, damn, there's 50 minutes left in this thing. It's like, I'm kind of like, what are we going to do for the next 50?
Well, the bomb's the whiteboard, sort of, right? Like, yeah, that's why we're here.
It's
right?
why we're here. They accomplished the mission. It felt like, and I could see another 10 minutes or 15 minutes, but I was like, 50 minutes. This is a whole story we have to tell. And honestly, I just didn't find that story as emotionally engaging or as compelling. And I didn't think Oppenheimer felt himself, the character felt like it was that, like, he wasn't like, this is my legacy or anything. He's just like, yeah,
that's what I'm saying.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. My security clearance, that sucks. Oh, well. And then he wins a prize anyway. And I think it's true to his character. And I think that's part of the reason it's there. But to me, I was just kind of disengaged. He didn't care too much. I didn't care too much. It was just a security clearance. He's getting older.
Well,
he doesn't
you
need
don't
to build
care
a bomb.
because he doesn't
Yeah.
express that he
Well,
cares. And
well, you'd
that's
have-
the writing side of it.
You'd have to do a lot to execute that he cares. And there's ways to do that, if he does care. But I think Nolan was like, I don't know how he felt about it, really.
Do you think there's an argument to be made that the story is the fact that he doesn't care? The fact that he's broken? I mean,
there's an argument to be made for that, but that to me is boring.
They didn't dramatize it. They didn't create conflict around that.
Yeah.
Like she, yeah.
Yeah. Like if he was, and there's some hints at stuff like that, like with his wife yelling at him, like, and he just sits there and kind of goes, I don't care. You know, it just for me, it's
Exactly.
It's the
hard.
biopic of it all. That's it's hard because it's what happened, right?
Well,
Like, you know what I mean? It's not just a story
but
you're writing.
the
It's
only
yeah.
reason I'd say that it's not just the biopic of it all is that's when you start doing this crazy framing and nonlinear and all that stuff. That's how you make that not happen. You somehow make the bomb go off and the thing happen and all of it happen at the same
Yep.
time. They can do whatever they want. So
Yeah.
I think there's something missing in the puzzle for me in the end. I think the puzzle gets a little off. When he started to shuffle things, I think that's the part where it's like, and maybe it's because Nolan was really interested in that stuff. He was like, but for me, like when Robert Downey's like, and you're the one holding the knife and this and that, it's almost like a spoof to me because who cares? It's a security clearance. And they're playing this dramatic music and stuff. And he's like, and then I twist the knife and then you don't know and I don't know and he's doing it. And it's like this big convoluted thing that's really just like, I'll rig the little tearing and we'll get a security clearance taken away. And then he won't be able to bother us anymore. And that because that's where I'm staring at it. So to me, it's all in Robert Downey Jr. Like it's almost like it was Robert Downey Jr.'s movie, and it really was from his point of view and his embarrassment. And we saw this kind of mad politician go down this crazy route and think he was Machiavellian. Like to me, maybe that would be the way to tell that story, but to tell it from Oppenheimer's perspective, I don't know. It just didn't grab me too much. I was just kind of like, I'm kind of done with this at this point. It's and
Yeah, it could
yeah,
be. It's also it's like not just. It's also not just screenplay. It could be an editing criticism too. Like there's
For me, it's
if
the
there was a,
writing, like straight up.
if there was a way to like get to the bomb at the end of the movie while also showing that stuff, so it all crescendos at the same time.
that's
You know what I mean?
yeah. And I don't
All
have
right,
the
let's
answers.
like
It's
actually hit the actual talking point. The talking point that Jamie's like talking around and you're both circling around the same thing is like, in my opinion, the stakes for both of those framing devices are really not compelling. And you're talking about two of the main storylines of the movie building to something that for me wasn't compelling, which is okay, like Strauss gets elected. First of all, like Bob, I think your Amadeus comparison is fucking awesome. Except that's
Well,
not
apparently it was exactly what they were thinking. I
except
didn't
it's
know
not
that.
it doesn't play out that way. It is a reveal that he's Amadeus. So for it's like 90 pages, 90 minutes of the movie before it shifts that he's a manipulative like politician. The first half it's played very straight. Like it's not that he's on a vendetta against that. It shifts to, oh, I've been manipulating this situation the whole time. That's like a late reveal. And then so it's sort of like late breaking stakes, right? Like that. It's like
Mhm.
all of a sudden 100 minutes into this thing, I'm supposed to feel like, oh shit, I don't want to get him elected. Because even from Oppenheimer's perspective, when they're in the war room together, like Robert Downey Jr.'s character Strauss is not portrayed as a man, and I know this on purpose, right? Because he's being fooled by Op. That's the whole thing. But I think that comes at a loss of emotion, which is like when he's in the war room, Oppie looks at what Robert Downey Jr. says with respect, and he listens to him, and he's like, this guy belongs at the table. This guy, like, I should value and listen to his opinion, even if it differs than mine. There's no tension about this guy is manipulating the situation, so I need to make sure he doesn't get to do that, which is basically the outcome we're supposed to be fearing, right? Like in the end,
Right.
like if he gets elected, then he's going to just do this all over again. Except you're never made to feel that way for until like 100 minutes into the movie. And it's because from a writing standpoint, how you make that happen is you have like 10 minutes into that story, you have Oppenheimer be like, this guy is a fucking manipulative, crazy guy. Like, if he gets elected, like we're like the country is like bound to do something just like it did before. You know, you dramatize the stakes for Strauss being elected, and then you build to the revelation that yes, Strauss has been manipulating this. Strauss is the one who got him in the
Is
room
that
and get him in
accurate though?
trouble. What do you mean?
To real life?
I'm just saying, what's the big reveal? What's the big outcome to Robert Downey Jr.'s character
No, I'm
being
not
put on the
disagreeing with what you're
council?
saying. I think you
You're
guys. I'm
saying
saying that I think that also biopics as a viewer, there's a part of me that's like, if it's accurate, I'm like okay with it.
okay.
Does that make sense? I'm actually enraptured because it's real.
Yeah.
That
Okay.
there's a part of me that I'm forgiving of that because of what it is. If we were talking about something that wasn't based on anything, absolutely agree with you. But I admit that there's a part of me that's like, I don't mind the actual like setup of their prior relationship in a non-Hollywood way,
Okay.
and the build and everything. Like that doesn't bother me as much because of the reality of the movie itself.
Okay.
Which I think also goes into writing. You're writing a
Yeah.
biopic. I think for a lot of people that doesn't bother them, but what you're saying also is not wrong.
Yeah,
And I agree with it.
I just in the same on the same side as to Jamie's point about his wife, about Oppenheimer's wife being like, "Why don't you fight?" That is exactly how you dramatize. That's the moment when you get
She's the
Oppenheimer
audience.
to say how he feels, and you pull it out of him, right? And number one, this script didn't do that. Number two, that doesn't come until page 100. The
Mm-hmm.
first time someone says, "Why don't you fight?" to him in that storyline is 100 pages, and then even then, no one's talking about like all the stakes for him losing his security clearance are barely mentioned. So I don't even know what happens to him when he loses his security clearance. So why am I supposed to care? Like, what am I rooting for him to succeed over? You know what I mean? And that for me is writing.
The why am I supposed to care is weird for me because I feel like the movie does a good job of showing exactly what the government is trying to do to him and what the government's saying about the entire situation. I don't know. That's what I care about. You're talking about the character part of it, which, valid. But I also find the actual, like, larger story that it's hinting at really interesting and engaging for me, at least. I don't know.
Gotcha.
Like, literally the government is trying to pin everything on him, McCarthyism and all this stuff. They're trying to get to his roots and everything. We know as the audience that it's complete bullshit.
Right.
Oppenheimer feeling complete guilt for the fact that he's maybe destroyed the world. I don't know. There's a lot of weight there. I think that just talking about that, you're missing. Like his guilt over the weight of maybe destroying the world. He kind of doesn't care about the smallness of what you guys are having a problem with.
Then have him at the dinner table say that. That's all you need.
I guess.
Have
I don't know if I need that.
him be
I don't
like,
know if I need that.
never mind. Have him be like, who cares about my reputation? What about the 200,000 people?
I don't think the actual guy would have said that though.
So you're saying would ring false if he said that?
Yes, I mean what Jamie said. I've watched a few documentaries on Oppenheimer. I don't think the actual guy was like that.
Yeah, I think he's really,
especially after the bomb. He doesn't speak like that.
I got you.
Even when he died of cancer, when he got his diagnosis, everyone says he was very sullen, quiet.
I guess I'm the guy then that I'm the asshole at the notes table going, I don't care. I need to understand what he feels, and therefore you need to violate the actual reality of the character in order to help the audience, or me at least, understand what I'm supposed to feel.
I think
I'd rather this than Bohemian Rhapsody, I guess is what I'm saying.
Oh, and I don't like
Bohemian Rhapsody, right? No. I'm not saying you do. You know what I mean? Like there's a lot of like Hollywood and Bohemian Rhapsody.
And this is what's interesting about this is so
I love that we differ, by the way.
I think his true to life character is very complex and nobody really knows like how he felt. Was he guilty? Was he not? Was he doing it for show? Was he really? I think that's the thing about him, was he's kind of a very complex, sending mixed signals at times.
Which they do dramatize from members on his team say that very thing, and that's what I'm talking about. We know that people feel that way about him.
And the movie,
people say that
he wasn't a vocal person that said those things in real life. It would be a better, more interesting movie on the surface if they just added that in. If he said stuff,
yeah, right. And
but
I think the movie is trying to honor that and make it ambiguous and let us decide, much like the world has to decide. It's like, it's not saying this is how Oppenheimer was. I'm going to tell you. I'm going to let you in on the secret. I'm going to reveal it. But my thing is, I think it was I read a review. I think that Script Shadow didn't, Script Shadow, the website. He didn't like this movie either. He doesn't like anything though. And I remember I read a review
like
from him.
MacGruber? No, just kidding.
He probably did. He hates almost everything though, which is always, but he said that, but I like this point he made. He said, and this is what I mean, like in a documentary, that's fine. Like I watched the documentary and it was presented linearly. So, then it goes into Oppenheimer's later life and how he was, tried to stop the H bomb and how he eventually was weeded out of politics and then got awards anyway. And, that was fine. That's a documentary and I'm fine with it in a documentary. But this is a movie, and this is a movie that's heavily manipulative of events. And to point to a great documentary that's heavily manipulated, even though it's long form, the Michael Jordan documentary a few years back, like it jumped all around, and it would start at one place and jump to another, and it was really well done. But anyway, back to Script Shadow. Like Script Shadow said, imagine if Rocky had the fight, but still had another hour. And the next hour was somebody screwing him out of a marketing deal or something. I don't know. So he didn't quite say that.
I don't think that's a good comparison to this story.
That's to me what it felt like.
This
a little
is
bit.
literally this. Like, this has like the heaviness of changing the entire world that we actually live in.
So when the
Rocky doesn't have that.
But when the nuclear bomb went off, that changed the world. And then we still had 50 minutes to kind of because we know that changed the world. That was the start of the chain reaction. So to acknowledge that in 10 minutes, fine. Spend 50 minutes talking about a bureaucratic manipulation that because a guy was embarrassed, really. That was the drive of it. And we were talking about things like Russian collusion and stuff like that, things that didn't matter compared to the grand scheme of the fact that we started the chain reaction that'll ultimately destroy the world. That's my thing. It's like this
Do you
part.
think that's a symptom of it being a POV story? Because the book was like that, because it's about Oppenheimer. It's not about the bomb. Technically, it's about
the strange.
him.
The strange thing is, yes, I do think it's a symptom of what's the story about him. The strange thing is he's non-linear jumping around for the whole movie, but then that's when he chooses to get linear and just coast.
Yeah,
and that's the part where I'm like, to me, it just didn't work as well. Like I was like, okay, 50 minutes. Robert Downey. Okay.
And then I go back to why I believe that I'm diagnosing your emotional response is because the story DNA for those individual framing devices is not like well constructed. Is what I'm saying. There's not a hero with a goal and an obstacle and stakes the way there is on the flashback, right? The flashback is all a very not like linear arc plot. We got to gather the team and build the bomb and make the bomb. And now the bomb goes off. It's very arc plot Hollywood story. But then you get to these framing devices and they're not. And because it works so well on the past storyline, those other ones, they don't mesh with it, is what I'm saying. Yeah.
Here's another example I could give.
I don't agree.
I
mean, obviously,
I think a great movie could be made from just that part. Like after the bomb, we start there, and it's Oppenheimer and blah, blah, blah. I think you can make a great movie. Lincoln is a good example. That's about the amendment passing. But imagine if the first 2 hours of Lincoln were about him winning the Civil War, blood and death and this and that, and he's the leader and blah, blah, blah. And then we go for another 50 minutes of him doing a trial to win the thing, where he already won the big thing, where he already shifted the world.
I don't know if I would hate that either.
Okay. Yeah. It's
you know what my favorite David Fincher movie is Zodiac. And Zodiac, it ends. I don't know if you guys have seen Zodiac.
I love Zodiac, yeah.
Zodiac just ends with I mean, it's one of the most unsatisfying movies. It's a lot of people love it, but a lot of people don't like Zodiac because it's just they didn't
nothing's resolved.
Nothing's resolved, and it leaves it up to the audience of what happened here. I'll say this: I feel like that about the last 50 minutes for me. It's more almost about the audience and telling us the truth. Because remember, there's a part in the movie where Oppenheimer says, "Is anyone going to be left to tell the truth of what happened here?" I feel like the last 50 minutes kind of was that. It was Nolan trying to do that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah,
I think
I that's why I kind of dug about it. I'm not, but it's, as far as a structure conversation, I understand what you guys are saying.
To me, it's more about the composition of it all.
Yeah,
I like the storyline in it. I think it's I like knowing that piece of information. I like hearing the big picture. I just think my problem is how it's balanced. Like it's
Gotcha.
how the portion.
Everything I've been.
Yeah,
I agree.
No, it could be. I think it could be edited so the all crescendos at the same time.
It's weird. It's weird to me
be more
because
gripping.
Bob, when you describe what you just described about what you enjoy about it, is like the truth behind it, right? To me, that feels like the point of it all, and I do enjoy learning about it on its own, but fit in with all of this. The way it's executed doesn't taste right to me.
I just realized how I feel about it. It's like going to dinner. And you have your appetizer, and it's really good. And then you have your meal, and they bring you out this great dessert. And then they go, and here's a turkey. And I'm like, what the? I have my dessert. I got a turkey. I got to eat a turkey. And it's like, yeah, it's like, nah. And I'd like a turkey.
Turkey is quite good, though.
Turkey tastes good. It just didn't taste good after I ate my full meal.
It's a turducken, man, because it's got another meal in there.
Yeah. But if you balance the turkey in with the rest, this is what I'm saying. If you balance it out and you bring the turkey out the right time,
you just got a nice full belly.
Yeah, there's a way to do it. That's all I'm saying, and that's why I do like the movie. It's just
I feel like you could. I feel like it's an editing thing, man. I think you could edit the movie in a way that it would all crescendo at the same time, and it'd be more gripping for everybody. Still 3 hours.
But by the way, these biopics are one of the hardest things to write. So I don't necessarily fault him. Like I'm not like this is lazy writing. This is bad writing. These are really, really hard to do. They're hard to pull off, and I think that's why it still ends up in my top 10 out of 15.
I think also, I admit my opinion's a bit weird because for me, The Bomb is not as gripping. You know, I think, and it goes again, real life stuff like Jamie said earlier. I know exactly what's going to happen there.
Sure.
So to me, there's actually an aspect of like, all right, yeah, it's going to go off and all that's not going to happen. Let me know what the fallout was. And I'm so, in a weird way, I'm almost more interested in after the bomb.
Yeah, because you don't know it. It's new.
I know the before the bomb stuff. So I'm like,
Makes
that's
sense.
kind of maybe I showed up for that movie, the turkey.
Yeah,
I showed up for the turkey and not the regular meal, more so in my mind, because I'm like,
yeah,
get to the bomb going off. We got it. It's gonna the ship's gonna fucking sink. Titanic. We get it.
The weird thing about me is, especially with biopics, I like and somebody told me this once, like that I read their script and I gave them notes. I actually like process. Like I would have liked more about how the bomb works. I would have liked to have been educated more about that. They really stayed away from that. I thought they gave you just enough, so we're not going to bore you with. I would sit there for a quantum physics lesson. Like that's the way. Like I like when The Big Short or something really tries to explain, like, here's how the subprime, and they try to break it down in a way I understand. I love that.
They like do like the slightest bit, but it's not.
They do
one of my favorite exposition scenes, by the way.
I love that, but I've given notes on that before, and I've had people say, "Yeah, I don't think people like the process how to do something in a script." And I'm like,
even though it's real, it might come off as double mumbo jumbo. You know, even though it's real for the audience, it's like, dude,
get
past the physics.
I kind of want to like go out and feel like I'm an expert on like how the bomb works, but I know that's not for everybody. So it's everybody's different taste. Some people might be into the shady government doing shady things and the backroom drama. And I get that too. I mean, that can be a fun story too. I'm kind of there for how did they build this thing in a town, a team. It's almost like a heist movie to me or something. They built a team and they did the thing and they did there's a ticking clock I get that the movie's about him and that's one chapter in his larger life, a big chapter, but one chapter in his larger life. So these movies are not easy to
difficult.
pull off.
Yeah, that's it's hard to juggle all this, and it's real, and you have integrity.
I think
it's like
I think
fuck.
I think that's why when I left this movie, I was charged up to go find out more, and honestly, I didn't find out much more. The movie gave me almost everything about him. There's only a little bit more to find out because the movie did a really, really good job of giving you that big picture of him. So
that's important to me too, in a weird way with this. It's like, I'd rather the movie kind of cover everything as a piece than be as like a poppin', save the cat Hollywood thing. You know what I mean? Like, there's part of me that's like, just do it all. Give it to me in this giant chunk. It's not always going to be as sharp as it could be, but I'm happy it's all there. You know what I mean? Like, it's nice that it's like, if you want to know about Oppenheimer, you can actually watch this movie and walk away with something. I do like that.
You can walk away with something.
It's perfectly structured.
Yeah, and it's not like everybody's going to raise their hand and say that's not the real story or anything. It's a pretty good job of what it did, and then you can be like,
it's a monster to write. I mean, like, it is,
it is.
But yeah, I wasn't trying to invalidate anything you were saying about structure. I get it. I get what you're saying. If the bomb going off was at the end, yes.
Well, I think it's a bold choice to have it not go off in the end. I do.
Yeah, it is kind of a big swing, right?
Yeah, I think it is. Yeah.
And I'm sure him and anyone that likes the movie would argue, just like you are, Bob, that it's not about the bomb, it's about the guy, and the guy, this is the big picture and all that stuff.
And the guy is weird. The guy himself is fucking weird.
And it's really me rewriting, after the fact. But my only thing is, I agree with all of that. I think it is about him, and I like all the stuff they put in it. I just wanted that meal thing, that rebalance a little bit. I think 50 minutes of that was just too long after the emotional high point of the thing.
It's funny that I'm the one arguing for the movie.
I love it.
Fucking Nolan episode. What
great.
A weird.
I love when we disagree. It's great.
Yeah, but me arguing for Nolan is so odd. It's just like,
basically, I want to see the Topher Grace re-edit of Oppenheimer.
Yes,
it's like 90 minutes.
Let Topher have his way. And
tight 90 minutes.
I mean, if you just cut out the bomb making part and just made that a 90-minute movie without all the other errata, it's a good like TV movie.
Yeah, I think so.
You know what I mean? It's a good meat and potatoes movie.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. You got a mission, everything, just fucking put the team together. It's a sports movie, right? Can we do it? Can we make the playoffs?
Yep. The weird thing is, I think you could make two movies out of this. I think you could make the building the nuclear bomb triumph movie in some weird way. And I think you could also do the opposite, which is like after the nuclear bomb, we had the triumph, but really it wasn't a triumph at all. And I think he managed to do a rise and fall movie in some ways, which is another common biopic thing. There's the positive times, there's kind of the uplifting times. We're going to win the day, we're going to save the world. But then there's the negative consequence of that. And I think that's what he was trying to do, because if you just did the rah-rah, the bomb, we did it kind of thing, then it would ring true to all of us that know the consequences, the modern day Prometheus aspect of it. So it wouldn't work, it just wouldn't work. So
there's also just a lot of real life roadblocks if you want to be accurate, like they deal with his, he's Jewish. We got World War II, Hitler. He is motivated by actually that on a personal level. The movie, it doesn't do the best job of showing us that.
I agree.
Like his passion for that.
Yes.
But also, I feel like it's accurate to Oppenheimer's actual person.
Gotcha.
Right. I agree.
He's such a non-expressive man. You know what I mean? He'll say a sentence. And
that's not a recipe for emotionally engaging story.
No, it's not. No. I guess that's what I was trying to say is like,
we're going to write a story about a guy who doesn't emote.
But he also did the thing that changed the entire world. So it's like you're making the story about the guy who changed Earth forever, the ones that me and you and all of us live in forever. We could die at any moment, be incinerated.
Yeah.
But the guy is also like a non-emotive dude.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, so it's like fighting with like, what was this guy like versus what kind of movie you want to make. Yeah. I guess I'm saying I can give it a lot of more cachet.
Makes sense.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, it's even something
not
like
talking about structure, just him himself. Like, I understand that this guy was like this.
It's that whole thing where you say if you put that in a screenplay, nobody would believe it. Like him poisoning the people in the beginning. It's a weird,
which might not have happened. That's still
there, but there are elements that are probably or something like it, or there's a weirdness back there. But
And it's a nice parallel to the bomb itself and everything. It's that's like maybe the most Hollywood little thing, right? Like the parallel between the apple and and then you got the apple representing
it's the escalation. It's
the
the
apple
little,
representing the ultimate sin of man. I
yes.
mean, like you got all that stuff in there. That may be the most Hollywood part.
And I don't know, when I learned about atoms, the way I was taught was through an apple. So it was like,
right.
Very
And
specific.
You got Newton in there too with the apple. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff in there. You know?
It was the right choice, premise specific. Yes.
It's a very and it's in the book. So they're not like, they weren't making up for the movie. It's in the book, but in the book it's also maybe fabricated.
Gotcha.
It's like not a real
It works
story, I believe.
well.
Jamie, you might know that. I don't.
I remember reading like it's not that it's fabricated, but the details aren't that specific. I think I don't remember what they were, but it's not like you know what I mean. Like
his grandson denies that it happened or something.
Right.
The family denies
like
that it
maybe
happened.
he got accused of it or something, but
maybe
it's not.
Yeah,
I can't remember exactly what it was, but you're absolutely right that was something that they sort of made more concrete than it really was. But maybe,
but that's like, but embellishing that works so well for the movie.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you guys want to talk about 5-point fun in games? I believe that's where we are.
I think that's where we are.
That's where we are, right?
So this is just super quick because I did kind of, when I watch this movie, I think about it. Even though this structure is so weird that I'm not sure what the fun and games really is or what the midpoint is, because it's all kind of messed up in some ways, in good ways. It's shuffled around, I should say. But one thing I came up with this idea. A lot of people have trouble writing the fun and games section. In Save the Cat, the fun and games section is the beginning of the second act. It's the first half of the second act. It's usually like, is it 30% of your movie or something like that? Usually it's a big long section that's in kind of the early first half of your movie. And a lot of people get stuck on it. And we've talked about it before where a lot of people that I know just write a montage and think they're done. Like, it's like, I did the montage, I did training montage.
Slap an 80s song on there, you're good to go.
And while you do often see montages in there, especially in like a Rocky movie or something where there's training or getting ready or something, driving or whatever it is, dating, there's often a montage in there. It's usually more than a montage. The funny thing is, I've heard people level a criticism at this movie, or even, I think this was in the John August interview that they had on Script Notes, where they said the kind of the bomb part is kind of like the movie is a montage. Like it's like so fast and it keeps going from thing to thing that it's like a montage. But the 5-point fun and games is taking an idea from Save the Cat, the 5-point finale, which we've talked about once or twice, and as a strategy. So I don't think every movie checks this box. I don't even think this movie necessarily checks this box, but I'm going to use it as an example of how to think about fun and games. If you're really stuck on fun and games and don't know what to do, and my suggestion is you take the story DNA, so the hero, goal, obstacle, and stakes of your log line. So in this case, if we assume that the log line is more the flashback story, which probably is how it's pitched to an extent, which is like, Oppenheimer must lead a team to build the most powerful weapon ever made before the Germans do it first and win the war, or something like that, right? If you take that as the log line, and then you don't mix in necessarily,
not too different from Indiana Jones and the Lost Ark.
No, right. In fact, when I was watching last night and the people came to talk to him, I couldn't help but think about when the people come and interrupt Indy's day at the school to talk to him, and I was almost wondering if when they wrote Raiders, if they had that in mind in some ways, like in a weird sort of way. But
a race to beat the Nazis.
Yeah, I couldn't help but
for a world dominating weapon
thing.
And they come to a professor, educated person, a knowledgeable person to help them win the war, and their military and their government and all the other stuff. It's kind of interesting.
We've done Raiders too, by the way. Anyone listening?
Yes, you can go check it out.
Yeah.
So if you assume that's the goal and stakes, the 5-point finale is gather the team, execute the plan, high tower surprise, dig down deep, and execution of the new plan. They're your 5 points. But I think it works in funny games too. And I think that's why you see the montages, because a lot of times in the gathering the team, that's like a montage. So in this case, you have Oppenheimer and he gathers the team. He has to recruit people, right? He has to.
It's amazing how like simple it is too. It's like pulled off just like a 90s sports movie almost.
It's
Yeah.
very much like a sports movie, like a heist movie.
Yeah.
Like a golden fleece, as we talk about in the
Yeah.
genres. So he builds the town. He plans who's going to do what. It's all that kind of stuff. It's like he's kind of breaking down the divisions, executing the plan. They start to build it. They realize, and a lot of this is kind of intellectual. This is the part I like, which I wish they did more of. But it's the marbles and the fishbowl.
What a great device.
It's on my list. It's on my list.
I hope that was
later.
real.
Yeah.
I hope that really happened. Yeah.
The marbles. I have a feeling that didn't happen, but I don't know. I have a feeling that was.
It might be in the book.
Christopher
You
Nolan.
might know.
Yeah. But maybe. So the marbles in the fishbowl. The discussion of how to do it, how to get around obstacles, how to get around compartmentalization, having to get around compartmentalization, all that kind of stuff. Dealing with the government. All this stuff is executing the plan. This part I'm going to fudge a little bit because it's really hard to tell where things go. But let's say the roadblock, I call it the plan roadblock as opposed to the Hightower surprise. So usually and this is the big thing. So if you're doing a fun and games, come up with the plan, have them do the plan, but then throw a roadblock in their way in your fun and games. In my case, I targeted like the war with Germany ends. That's kind of a roadblock, right? So then they go into this scenario where it's, now what, I call it, which is the dig down deep. But in funny games, they haven't arced yet. So I just call it, now what? So in this case, they kind of discuss, they decide why, Japan is still dangerous and, everything there. So then they execute the new plan. And I think the execution of the new plan, which is testing the bomb, using it, I think that takes us into the midpoint, and then the bad guys close in this case. It doesn't really shake out the middle, whether it's a midpoint or not, because again, the way it's structured, it has a very long setup. This movie has like a 50-minute setup, and then it has 50 minutes in the end, and then kind of this flashback scene is sandwiched in the middle. But it kind of works out. I think that if you look at the midpoint as being when they drop the bomb, the bad guys close in as kind of the repercussions and the psychological damage to Oppenheimer, maybe the world, the scars of it. And then, the rest of the movie kind of gets more into the modern day story and stuff like that.
So anyway, I think it's a great parallel for great example for how to use the fun and game. I wouldn't have expected the 5-point fun and games to show up in Oppenheimer, but it does. Yeah.
yeah. It's
so much fun in so many games.
Yeah, so Jesus. The not so fun in games.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. So I think the biggest takeaway is the gathering, the team, and the execution of the plan. If you're, that's probably where your montage stuff may happen, or it might feel that way. It might be that stuff, but throw in the plan roadblock, and then continue on. So don't feel like you're done after gathering the team and executing the plan. Throw something in the way that then they have to shift to plan B before they get to the midpoint. That's I think the big strategy here. And again, not all movies, just a strategy if you're brainstorming your idea.
Very cool. Debating the agenda.
This one's mine. So okay. I want to breeze through it because we got a lot to talk about still. So when for all my complaints about the framing device wraparounds, people not talking about the goals and the obstacles and the stakes and the deadline, I feel like one thing this movie does very well is debating the overall agenda of creating the bomb and then launching the bomb, right? And so when I'm reading scripts, a lot of the time this is what's missing. We might have all of the necessary ingredients for a great story, the story DNA that Jamie talks about a lot, hero, goal, obstacles, stakes. and a deadline to achieve it. But we never get scenes where people are talking about it like, oh shit, here's what happens if we fail. Here's what we can gain if we succeed. Here's the deadline to do those things. This movie does a great job of giving us a wide variety of debates around this topic. Like you have the debate with his friend who's just talking about the justice of it all, right? He's like, you drop a bomb and it falls on the just and the unjust. I don't wish the culmination of 3 centuries of physics to be a weapon of mass destruction. And Oppenheimer says, I don't know if we can be trusted with such a weapon, but I know the Nazis can't, so we have no choice. That's a great way to express what the character is feeling about the agenda and the task at hand and the stakes for failing, right? And there's
really justifies to the audience why you would ever
exactly
right,
and in
why you would do.
And in a story, you need these moments where there is a debate about the agenda, and you need to continuously have them as the story unfolds to give us status updates about how the character is feeling about the situation as it continues to get. They continue to get either closer or farther.
If you're making a Jurassic Park prequel, you'd have to have that kind of line
about
in there.
Them with with the mosquito and the and
you'd have to have that line of why they went. If the movie was about the creation of the dinosaurs instead of what we got,
that's a great.
And
parallel.
There is an Oppenheimer reference in Jurassic Park, by the way. I just remember that. So
I didn't remember, but there's a great debate with Einstein, right? He's like, Oppenheimer says, when we detonate an atomic device, we might start a chain reaction that destroys the world. And Einstein says, stop. Share your findings with the Nazis so neither side destroys the world. Like that's who better to debate for the audience, the stakes about this situation and the pressure than fucking Einstein.
I think it's where the movie really sings.
Yeah, so Einstein, I think if you
stuff like that, that's so good.
I think if you can learn, if there's one thing you can definitely learn as a screenwriter from this movie, it's the way the movie does successfully handle those debates and help you connect with the emotional side of this whole agenda of building the bomb. They have a great many different characters from different perspectives at that time, basically hashing it out with Oppenheimer about how they all feel, and I think it's just a great screenwriting technique. You need to have these debates about your agenda. So it's a quick one.
I also think that plays into some of his character as well. We'll get to that.
Yeah.
But, you know what I mean? Like knowing exactly like how the depths of the danger of what you're doing and what this man is like actually accomplishing.
It gives context to the choices that he makes. Yes.
Right.
Yes.
It's
really, necessary.
Really touches him out.
Yeah.
Would you ever want to talk again if you did that?
No, you're to your point, Bob.
I don't know. If I knew I would destroy the world potentially, I don't know.
Yeah, to your point.
Nobody wants to hear what I got to say. That. Well, this is agenda checkpoints and hourglasses. Is that?
It's on the same topic, but I kind of
I
wanted. This is another one I wanted to give props to Nolan. This is me giving props to the script for all my problems with it. A really on the same kind of mindset when you have an agenda, when you're writing a script where a hero has an agenda, and you need to create a deadline, and how appropriate in this movie about building a bomb that there's just like one deadline after another. We got this much time left. We got this much time. And yeah, Jamie's right. They kind of go back and forth between that. But I do feel like there's constant urgency. And I think that the reason is because of what these things I call hourglasses. And what that is, it's basically like a shortcut to give the audience a measurable deadline update. Like, this is how much sand is left in the hourglass, right? And a easy to understand example of this concept is the disappearing family photo in Back to the Future, right? That's what I call an hourglass. Every single time we see that photo, more sand has come from that hourglass. There's less time, and we can instantly understand a very complex idea that he has this much time left until he can achieve the goal, or else he's going to disappear, right? What better way to do that? And it's not a clock, right? And so these are ticking clock mechanisms that create urgency.
It's sort of a clock. It's not a clock.
Right. It functions like a clock. It makes you feel time is running out, or we're getting, in this case, we're kind of, we feel we know the bad thing that's going to happen. So we're feeling tension around it. And this movie does a great example of giving you lots of deadline updates without talking about a clock. So the example you guys gave, the Goldfish Bowl, that's an hourglass. So like it's almost exactly an hourglass, right? Like they're like
just really big sand.
They explain this really complex idea. The bomb needs 30. It's going to be a 33-pound spear with plutonium, and we need this much plutonium to power the bomb. And once we get it, we can make it, right? And so the movie gives you like several updates where we just see that bowl. No one says anything, but the bowl keeps getting filled with marbles, and we feel like, oh shit, we're getting closer. We're getting closer to this bomb going off, and it creates urgency and tension. And then once the bowl is filled up, they move to a new technique, which is they actually show you pieces of the silver spear, and we keep getting updates as the sphere is getting bigger. And it functions just like the glass bowl. It's an hourglass. We're feeling that tension. The deadline is getting closer. And then once the sphere is constructed, then they go to they switch to the bomb test, and they show you like a bomb test that's small. Then they show you a bomb test that's a little bigger. Then they show you a bomb test that's a little bigger, right? The force keeps, so you feel like, oh shit, like, so it's another hourglass where we feel the deadline is getting closer. And then they move to the construction of the tower. We keep cutting back to the tower. We get a scene, then we cut back to the tower, and it's a little taller. And we know that when that tower is full, that's where they're putting the bomb. So, and then the storm is another one, right? Like here comes the bomb, and bam, the storm hits. And it delays the test, but we feel urgency. Every time we see that storm, we're like, oh shit, like when is it going to happen? So this movie just does a great job of using those shortcuts to create urgency without anybody saying anything. Nobody needs to say a word, and it's not a clock, but you feel the time that it's meant for you to tell. So this is another great thing you can learn from the script.
And it does have the benefit of like everything that the urgency is about in every possible way the audience doesn't want to happen.
Right. Even
I don't want
though
the bomb. I don't want
right.
the Nazis to win. I don't want the bomb to be made. I don't want, you know what I mean? You don't want anything
because of those
to
debates that we had. We had 50 minutes of debates.
It's all bad.
Yeah.
It's all working up to bad. Yeah. Handshakes.
I've talked about this in a couple episodes, so I'm gonna breathe through this one too, because I want to get to the big talk at the end here. So this is another shortcut that you can use. So okay, you've got a relationship in your story, even though I made complaints about the handling of the relationship. This is something I like in the script about the relationship. You've got your two characters, right? And you've got like 90 pages of story, and you're only going to get 2 or 3 scenes with these characters together. How do you make it so the audience can instantly connect with this relationship? It's the literal version of that is like the handshake in Big between him and his friend, like my biscuit, a biscuit.
I wish that was in Oppenheimer.
No, but a very classic example of it is E.T. and Drew Barrymore's character Gertie. She teaches him to say "be good." And then that's they have 3 big moments where then he says, be good to her. And then when he's leaving the planet, he tells her, be good. And we have this instant connection, and it uses that handshake to show us, to help the audience track how the relationship is changing and how the character situation is changing over the course of the story. They just use that repetition of that handshake. And I think Oppenheimer, for its 3-hour running time, he's problem solving this, right? He's going like, shit, like I got all these characters and all these relationships. How do I keep the audience connected with them, right? And so he uses handshakes. There's 3 easy to learn from examples of handshakes in this movie, and that is Oppie and Tatlock, the what is her name? I always forget.
Florence Pugh.
Florence Pugh's character's name is Tatlock. Oppie brings Tatlock flowers, and she immediately throws them in the garbage. And that is a running gag with them. Every single scene with them, he brings her flowers and she throws them in the trash. And she's like, you didn't bring me flowers. And he pulls a flower out of his jacket and she throws it away immediately. Right. And so that's a handshake, that using a thing and a scenario that we instantly connect with their relationship. And it helps us remember how we felt about the last scene with them and how we want to feel about their outcome together. So that's an example. Oppie and his wife Kitty's code for good news or bad news: take in the sheets, don't take in the sheets. There's the repetition of the phone call and the take in the sheets when something good happens, don't take in the sheets when something bad happens. So that's another example of a handshake that, like, when it's said, we can instantly connect with how things are progressing or regressing for the relationship and the characters. And then there's another one with his brother Frank. When his brother Frank says that he's getting married, Oppie isn't impressed with the woman he wants to marry, but he says to his brother, if you're happy, I'm happy. And then in the end, when they don't really get much screen time together, the brother and Oppie, amidst the story, but how they make us feel a connection in the end with his brother is they bring back that handshake at the Lifetime Achievement Awards ceremony. When his brother hands him the award, he whispers, we know that Oppenheimer is really like melancholy about getting this award, of course. And then his brother says to him, if you're happy, I'm happy.
I'm happy.
There's that handshake. So it's a very simple technique. And I think Nolan uses it well in this movie.
Did you name this technique?
Yeah, this is just my name.
I like it.
Yeah.
Because you're basing it off Big, sort of. I like it.
You reminded me of a spot that I watched this movie 3 times now, and there's one spot that kind of I hang on a little bit, and it's when they say, Oppenheimer called. He said to take down the sheets.
Yeah,
and it's just like, after what we've seen, it's just because we already know, and it's like that's where it ends. Like it's some big moment, like da da da. And I'm just like, really? That's where I don't know. Every time I watch it, I'm just like,
see, I actually like it because I know what it's doing.
I kind of like it,
and
I kind of like it.
Yeah.
I mean, it just feels like it's after the fact. Like it's like, why are we tacking on this?
They sort of had that scene with the laundry earlier.
They did,
I think, too.
Yeah.
They kind of said it.
Yeah, I think they did.
I get what you're saying. It's a
capper to something that's already been capped. Is the thing?
Yeah.
It's like,
I
don't know. It was weird to me. Every time I watch it, I'm just like, that's weird.
My
theory
is there's stuff that didn't make it in the final cut with those sheets.
So
the sheets, stuff with that.
So to me, that sheet thing would make more sense if we never saw the result of the bomb, like the cheap version of this movie. You know what I mean? And we couldn't afford it. So take down the sheets was the big dramatic, oh my God, the world's changed. But instead it's like, yeah, lady, we saw it blow up. And it's, I don't know. It's weird. Or somehow, like,
I wonder if that was real too.
It probably was.
Like they actually had that.
Yeah,
that makes it even better.
Yeah.
I
mean, we do this in life, right? This is how we have bonds with people with shit like this.
My justification was that's why it was in there, was because it was real and he liked it so much they just left it in. Because I keep thinking, it'd be one thing if like they had a big debate and she was like, this will change the world, we'll be dead, and you saw it in her face, like da, da, da. It's like, instead it's like, he did it, but we already knew he did it. I don't know. It's for some reason every time that's the scene that I'm always like, I cut that. It's weird.
I like that. That's the thing that stands out.
It is. It always pops to me. I'm like, no, I don't know.
Our last talking point is the big one, I guess.
Yeah.
I love the fact that you call him Oppie so much.
Well, that's what everybody in the movie calls him.
I know. It still sounds funny. For as serious as the subject matter is, calling him Oppie is funny to me. Does Oppie arc? We kind of touched this a little bit already, bit.
I call him Dr. Octopus.
Dr. Octopus.
Well, yeah, I guess for me, I'll say this. It ends with him admitting guilt, right? It's an admission of guilt. But
it doesn't just end with him admitting guilt. There's like most of the end of the movie is him just being guilty, I feel
right. And I guess for me, camera. Like he kind of, I don't know, that to me that's not like a revelation. Like it seems like he already knows he's guilty for most of the runtime.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, so I'm like, oh, it's like a serial killer being like, yeah, I kill people. Like, yeah, I am a killer. Like, it's kind of like a no shit. You created a bomb. Like, we've been talking about this for 2 hours. You created a bomb that's going to end the world. And so for me, that guilt isn't like a change. It's more just like an admission of something he's been feeling for a long time. So that's why I was like, what do you guys think about it? How does it connect with you?
Jamie, do you got something you want? I can go. I can go.
You can go. I mean,
Okay.
I don't really have too much for this.
For this, I think not to bring it back to the apple, but the beginning of the movie, his youth with the apple, it's really good to me because it says he often does things without thinking. He often is reacting emotionally, and he reacts fast, and just willy nilly at times. Like, what were you thinking? Like, you're gonna poison someone and kill them because of what he said. By the end of the movie, as we've already said, he's not that guy. That guy is dead, essentially. The kid that would poison that apple over what somebody said to him, what somebody, that's gone. Now, it took literally possibly destroying the whole world to get there, but I don't think he is a reactive character that would do brash things ever again. And I think that reads in that last 50 minutes.
I think that
You know what I
tracks
mean?
when you put it that way. His
yeah.
old way definitely is a
Is
guy.
gone.
Is that he would never be that guy again? Yeah,
I don't think he would ever cheat on his wife again and stuff, unless I'm wrong there about reality. I don't think like all his I don't know, just of the moment emotions and actions seem to have been crushed down under the weight of his actual guilt. And he is truly a different man. Like the guy, like we always say, the guy at the end of the movie, would he do the things at the beginning? No, in this case, absolutely not.
I think you're right.
That
That's
apple would never happen again. Nothing like that would ever happen. He probably would never endanger another human being's life again.
Yeah.
And also like well, that's good. I think I don't know if I can expand on that.
No,
anymore.
you said it. You helped me get to that. Okay.
Yeah.
I think you're right.
Yeah.
There's definitely moments of learning, like when he's imagining, the impact of the weapon and stuff like that.
Yeah, growing pains. Yep.
And so that stuff definitely lingers with him. In a weird sort of way, going back to my criticism, I think that's another weird part of the last 50 minutes is I don't think he changes over the last 50 minutes.
I would agree there too.
And that also tells me we're kind of at just sort of, we're at the end of the story. But yeah, I don't know that I also think that Nolan is doing this thing where he's kind of letting us figure out what he really thinks. Like, we don't know if he's kind of proud of what he did, guilty of what he did, or something. I think there is something ambiguous about him that he's hard to parse. I mean, we kind of project our own opinions on what we're seeing in this movie. So I'm not sure that the character arc is as dramatic.
That third act is where the ambiguity really feels like it comes into play.
It does.
Because Oppenheimer's not a good person, right? I mean, I don't know. Like the movie, that's where the movie is like almost asking us to decide, like Jamie's saying, like but I don't think the movie's ever saying he's a good person, even though we're with him this whole time.
For whatever reason, I'm always projecting on him that he kind of did what he did. And there's lots of justifications. At one point he said, I'm more scared that the Germans will get it first. And that's a great justification that he says. But I'm always like, I think he's a man of science sort of, and he did it because he could. You know what I mean? Like
not to bring Jurassic Park back into it.
I honestly think that's why he did it. That, and the Jurassic Park definitely has its inspiration from this to an extent. Not this movie, but Oppenheimer for real. But
he's a guy that did his job well, and it turns out that job was just the most horrible thing.
Yeah, he had to take his kind of brilliance to the ultimate conclusion. That was just the path he was set on. And that's my projection on his character when I watch him. Like in everything, my projection on his character, this doesn't mean anything really, is that everything else is kind of justification for that. But that's kind of, and he may have changed after the fact. Like maybe he did regret and realize some of these things that I'm saying after the fact. But that's my projection on him. Like this was almost like an inevitable course, and
I think
of somebody like him.
I think there's some interplay there with Einstein himself, because Einstein, like through Oppie, we see the same arc in Einstein. Einstein realizes that the things he discovered led to this, which is going to lead to the end of the world.
Yeah, he's a reflection,
and it's kind of
sure.
It's a reflection of that too. So that kind of helps with the arc, right? Like Einstein has his own really tiny arc in this movie. Obviously, in real life,
it's a
much bigger.
Ghost of Christmas Past or Future or whatever you want to
say.
Yeah.
Right. Yes. Exactly.
Like all great agents of change are.
Right. No, I mean, this is a hard question, isn't it?
Yeah, that's why I brought it.
Did the actual guy arc? I would think so.
I feel like to give this question a really, really good answer, I'd almost have to watch the whole thing again just for this question.
Just for the growing pains, the before world, the before snapshot, after snapshot, and growing pains in between. Yeah.
Yeah. And for now, as somebody that doesn't like to rewatch movies, watching this movie 3 times is probably all I'm going to watch for now.
Same. I even argued for it, and I don't really want to sit there again for a couple of years. Yeah. No, but I think that some of the romantic relationship stuff also comes into play. Like I said it, but I don't think he would ever cheat on his wife or think about it again. I think, unless I'm wrong I don't know the actual history of that. But
isn't there something
though?
Don't they hint at the fact that he did? Like,
did he?
Yeah.
I don't.
And I think they mentioned some other affair he had with the woman we didn't.
But it was
know.
before. But it was before. I meant like after the bomb.
Okay.
Like I don't think that this man would be a womanizer ever again.
When the movie ends,
when the movie ends,
when
like
the movie ends. The story that continues is a guy who's way more loyal.
I gotcha.
You've got a guy who, let's just say this, he wasn't the ultimate evil as far as a human being was concerned, but he committed the ultimate sin. And it's almost like you read it as like he doesn't want to ever do anything wrong again. And he's just going to take whatever punishment he gets.
Right.
From what he did. That is an arc.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
It's like whatever I get, I deserve from now on. He's not wrong. But that's an arc to me.
Yeah. No, I think it does. Yep.
Yeah. Anything else?
Heavy shit to end on.
It's a really, it's a depressing end to a depressing movie.
Yeah.
I think that's everything, guys.
Definitely.
Yeah, I think that's everything for Oppenheimer. That's our second Christopher Nolan movie.
Yeah.
Yes.
Or have we done another one I'm forgetting?
I think that's it. I think it's just those 2.
Let's space them out next time. Memento wasn't that long ago.
No,
right?
It wasn't.
Yeah. So if we do The Dark Knight Rises, so Jamie can talk about the fight.
That's right.
He can just break
for an
down.
hour, just
3 hours. I just want to talk about that fight. I think
that fight.
We need to do a podcast on the fight.
We'll see Jamie arc because of the discussion on that fight.
Yes.
Did you guys want to plug anything, or do you have anything to tell people?
I'll just say real quick, if you have any questions, comments for us about this episode or other episodes, hit us up at writersblockbusterspodcast@gmail.com.
Yeah, and I have 2 things to plug. Last Night at Terrace Lanes is now available. You can watch it anywhere. If you want to watch it, check it out. And I'm doing a webinar for Save the Cat in February. It's kind of going to be a 2-day thing. It's and it's a lot of it. It's kind of like an advanced class, like this 5-point finale. Like that's the type of thing I'll be covering. Like it's kind of like you've read the books. Now I'm going to help you with some tips to fill out those beats. So I'd love, and it's not a hugely expensive one. So I'd love if anybody wants to check it out. Go to savethecat.com.
Perfect. That's it. Well,
That's it.
Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Hey, this is Bob Rose, and thank you for listening to Writers Blockbusters. If you'd like to financially support the show, please consider joining my Patreon. I've been producing the podcast for several years completely out of pocket, and I'd like to keep producing it ad-free and no longer at a loss. If you'd like to help, head on over to patreon.com/Bob Rose Sucks. That's right, Bob Rose Sucks. And if you want the one and only Jimmy George to help polish up that writing project you're kind of struggling with, head on over to scriptbutcher.com. As a listener, you already know he's the best there is, scriptbutcher.com. You can also support the show by simply sharing it or leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. We appreciate both. Thank you for listening, and see you next episode.